Chapter 19, Religion and Sexuality, Perspectives and Practices Across Cultures. Introduction. This chapter explores the complex relationship between religion and sexuality across various cultures. It highlights how religious beliefs and doctrines shape sexual norms, behaviors, and attitudes, influencing individual and societal views on sexuality. Section 1. Sexuality in Major World Religions. Christianity. Historical perspectives on sexuality in the Bible. The Bible's teachings on sexuality, marriage, and procreation. Interpretations of key biblical passages related to sexual behavior. Historical context of sexual norms in early Christian communities. Celibacy and the role of clergy. The significance of celibacy in the Catholic Church. Theological foundations for celibacy among priests, monks, and nuns. Differences in celibacy practices between Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and Protestantism. Contemporary Christian views on premarital sex, contraception, and LGBTQ+ issues. Diverse Christian perspectives on premarital sex and its moral implications. Views on contraception and family planning across different denominations. The evolving stance of various Christian communities on LGBTQ+ inclusion and rights. Islam. Quranic teachings on sexuality and marriage. The Quran's guidance on sexual ethics, marriage, and family life. The role of marriage in Islam and the importance of sexual relations within it. Concepts of modesty and chastity in Islamic teachings. The role of modesty and gender separation. The principles of hijab and gender interaction in Islamic culture. How modesty is practiced in different Muslim communities. The impact of these practices on social and sexual relationships. Views on contraception, polygamy, and sexual ethics. Islamic perspectives on contraception and reproductive health. The practice and regulation of polygamy in Muslim societies. Ethical considerations and debates within contemporary Islam. Hinduism. Sexuality in ancient texts, the Kama Sutra and the Puranas. Insights from the Kama Sutra on sexuality, love, and pleasure. Depictions of sexual relationships in the Puranas and other scriptures. The integration of sexual and spiritual life in ancient Hinduism. The concept of Kama, pleasure, and its place in the four goals of life, Purusharthas. Understanding Kama as one of the four Purusharthas, goals of life. Balancing Kama with Dharma, duty, Artha, prosperity, and Moksha, liberation. Modern interpretations and practices of Kama in Hindu society. Modern Hindu attitudes towards sexuality and marriage. Changes in attitudes towards premarital sex, marriage, and fidelity. The influence of Western ideas and globalization on Hindu sexual norms. The role of traditional values in contemporary Hindu communities. Buddhism. Buddhist teachings on desire and attachment. The Four Noble Truths and their relation to sexual desire. The concept of attachment and its impact on spiritual practice. Buddhist approaches to managing and transcending sexual desire. The practice of celibacy among monks and nuns. The significance of celibacy in monastic life. Rules and vows related to celibacy in different Buddhist traditions. How lay Buddhists interpret and practice sexual ethics. Lay Buddhist perspectives on sexuality and relationships. Ethical guidelines for lay Buddhists regarding sexuality. The role of mindfulness and compassion in sexual relationships. Diverse cultural practices and beliefs within the Buddhist world. Judaism. Sexuality in the Torah and Talmud. Biblical commandments and Talmudic discussions on sexuality. The role of sexual relations in Jewish law and ethics. Historical context and evolution of Jewish sexual norms. The importance of marital sex and procreation. The emphasis on procreation and marital intimacy in Judaism. Rituals and practices related to sexual purity and family life. How these principles are upheld in contemporary Jewish communities. Contemporary Jewish views on homosexuality, contraception, and family planning. Diverse Jewish perspectives on LGBTQ+ issues. Debates on contraception and reproductive rights within Jewish law. Modern challenges and adaptations in Jewish sexual ethics. Other religions and indigenous beliefs. Sexuality in Sikhism, Jainism, and other lesser-known religions. Ethical and spiritual teachings on sexuality in Sikhism and Jainism. How these religions approach celibacy, marriage, and sexual conduct. Comparisons with major world religions. Indigenous spiritual beliefs and practices regarding sexuality. The role of sexuality in indigenous spiritual traditions. Unique practices and rituals related to sexual behavior. The impact of colonization and modernity on indigenous sexual norms. How these beliefs integrate with or oppose modern sexual norms. The intersection of traditional beliefs with contemporary sexual ethics. Challenges and adaptations faced by indigenous communities. Efforts to preserve and revive traditional sexual practices. Conclusion. This chapter underscores the profound influence of religion on sexual norms and behaviors across cultures. By examining diverse perspectives and practices, it highlights the intricate ways in which faith and sexuality intersect, shaping both personal identities and societal values. Understanding these dynamics fosters greater respect and empathy for different cultural and religious approaches to sexuality. Section 2. The role of gender and sexual ethics. Gender roles and sexual norms. How religious doctrines shape gender roles and expectations. Religious doctrines often play a critical role in defining and perpetuating gender roles and expectations. These doctrines can dictate the roles of men and women in both the private and public space, including their responsibilities, behaviors, and social status. Christianity. In many Christian denominations, traditional teachings emphasize the role of men as providers and leaders, while women are often seen as caretakers and nurturers. Biblical passages such as those in Ephesians 5:22-33 are frequently cited to support these roles. Islamic teachings, as derived from the Quran and Hadith, outline specific roles for men and women. For example, men are generally expected to be protectors and maintainers of their families, Quran 4:34, while women's roles often center around homemaking and motherhood. However, interpretations and implementations can vary widely among different cultures and communities. Hinduism. Traditional Hindu texts like the Manusmriti detail distinct duties for men and women, with a significant emphasis on women's roles in family and domestic spheres. However, contemporary interpretations and practices are diverse and evolving. Buddhism. While early Buddhist texts often depict a patriarchal society, with women having limited roles in monastic life, many modern Buddhist communities advocate for gender equality, reflecting a more egalitarian approach. The impact of these roles on sexual behavior and relationships. Marriage and family structure. Religious teachings often emphasize marriage as the appropriate context for sexual activity, with defined roles for husbands and wives. This can influence the dynamics of sexual relationships, expectations of fidelity, and reproductive responsibilities. Sexual behavior. Gender roles can impact sexual behavior, including attitudes towards premarital sex, contraception, and sexual pleasure. For instance, in many religious contexts, women's sexuality is more strictly regulated compared to men's. Power dynamics. The prescribed gender roles can create power imbalances in relationships, affecting communication, consent, and mutual satisfaction in sexual relationships. Comparative analysis of gender dynamics in different religious contexts. Christianity varies significantly between denominations. For example, Catholicism upholds traditional gender roles more strictly than many Protestant denominations, some of which endorse gender equality in both religious and social contexts. Islam, while gender roles are more rigid in conservative communities, progressive interpretations and movements within Islam advocate for gender equality and reformation of traditional roles. Hinduism, gender roles can be rigid in traditional contexts, but there is also a rich history of female deities and powerful women in mythology that influence contemporary movements towards gender equality. Buddhism, generally more flexible, with many sects promoting gender equality. However, cultural contexts can lead to varying degrees of adherence to traditional gender roles. Sexual ethics and moral conduct. Ethical frameworks provided by different religions regarding sexuality. Religious ethical frameworks provide guidelines for sexual behavior, often emphasizing the importance of moral conduct, purity, and responsibility. Christianity. Christian sexual ethics often stress chastity, fidelity, and the sanctity of marriage. Sexual activities outside of marriage, such as premarital sex and adultery, are typically condemned. Islamic sexual ethics, derived from the Quran and Hadith, emphasize modesty, chastity, and marital fidelity. Sexual relations are permitted only within marriage, and both premarital and extramarital sex are considered sinful. Hinduism. Hindu sexual ethics are influenced by texts like the Manusmriti and the Kama Sutra. While marriage is considered the ideal context for sexual activity, there are also traditions that celebrate sexual pleasure as a part of human life, provided it aligns with dharma, moral duty. Buddhism. Buddhist sexual ethics focus on avoiding harm and practicing mindfulness in sexual conduct. Adultery and sexual misconduct are generally discouraged. The concept of sin and virtue in sexual conduct. Christianity. Sin in sexual conduct often includes actions like adultery, fornication, and homosexuality, depending on the denomination. Virtuous sexual conduct is typically confined to marital relations. Islam. Sexual sins include zina, fornication and adultery, and homosexuality. Virtue is associated with chastity, modesty, and fidelity within marriage. Hinduism. Sexual sins can include adultery and inappropriate relationships outside of one's caste or social order. Virtuous conduct involves adherence to one's dharma and maintaining sexual relations within the boundaries of marriage. Buddhism. Sexual misconduct includes adultery, coercion, and exploiting others sexually. Virtuous conduct involves respectful, consensual relationships that do not cause harm. How religious ethics influence laws and social policies on sexuality. Religious ethics often shape social policies and legal frameworks regarding sexuality, influencing issues such as marriage laws, reproductive rights, and LGBTQ+ rights. Marriage laws. Many countries with strong religious influences have laws that define marriage based on religious doctrines, affecting the legality of practices like polygamy, same-sex marriage, and divorce. Reproductive rights. Religious ethics impact policies on contraception, abortion, and fertility treatments. For example, Catholic teachings strongly oppose abortion and artificial contraception, influencing laws in predominantly Catholic countries. LGBTQ+ rights. The acceptance and rights of LGBTQ+ individuals are significantly influenced by religious ethics. While some religious communities are becoming more accepting, others continue to uphold doctrines that view homosexuality as sinful. Section 3. Contemporary issues and debates. LGBTQ+ rights and religion. Religious acceptance and rejection of LGBTQ+ individuals. Religious perspectives on LGBTQ+ rights vary significantly across different faiths and communities, ranging from acceptance and support to outright rejection and condemnation. Christianity. Within Christianity, there is a spectrum of views on LGBTQ+ rights. Some denominations, such as the United Church of Christ and the Episcopal Church, are supportive and perform same-sex marriages. In contrast, others, like the Roman Catholic Church and many evangelical denominations, oppose same-sex relationships based on traditional interpretations of biblical texts. Islam. Islamic teachings traditionally condemn homosexual acts as sinful. However, there are emerging voices within the Muslim community advocating for a more inclusive interpretation of the Quran, emphasizing compassion and understanding. Hinduism. Hinduism's vast array of texts and traditions offer diverse views on sexuality. While certain scriptures and traditions have condemned homosexuality, others, like the narratives of Ardhanarishvara, a deity combining both male and female aspects, and the Hijra community's recognition, suggest a more complex and varied approach. Buddhism. Buddhist views on LGBTQ+ rights also vary. Some Buddhist leaders, such as the Dalai Lama, have expressed cautious acceptance, emphasizing the importance of compassion and non-harm. However, traditional Buddhist teachings in many Asian cultures remain conservative. Theological arguments for and against LGBTQ+ inclusion. Arguments against. Traditional arguments often cite sacred texts to justify the exclusion of LGBTQ+ individuals. For example, passages from the Bible, Leviticus 18:22, Romans 1:26-27, and the Quran, Surah Al-Araf 7:80-81, are interpreted as condemning homosexual behavior. Arguments for. Progressive theologians argue for reinterpreting these texts in their historical context, suggesting that the overarching themes of love, justice, and compassion should guide contemporary understandings. They highlight the importance of inclusivity and the evolving nature of moral and ethical teachings. Case studies of religious communities navigating LGBTQ+ issues. The Episcopal Church. This church has been at the forefront of LGBTQ+ inclusion, ordaining openly gay bishops and blessing same-sex marriages, despite significant controversy and schisms within the Anglican Communion. Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity, Muscat. This organization works to support LGBTQ+ Muslims, challenging traditional interpretations and promoting inclusive religious practices. Hindu groups in India. Some Hindu organizations have supported LGBTQ+ rights, especially following the decriminalization of homosexuality in India in 2018. They highlight ancient texts and traditions that recognize and respect diverse sexual orientations. Premarital sex and contraception. Diverse religious stances on premarital sex. Christianity. Many Christian denominations discourage premarital sex, promoting abstinence until marriage. However, attitudes vary, with some liberal denominations adopting more permissive stances in light of modern societal changes. Islam. Islam strictly prohibits premarital sex, considering it zina, fornication, which is punishable under Islamic law. The emphasis is on maintaining chastity until marriage. Hinduism. Traditional Hindu teachings advocate for chastity before marriage, although attitudes can vary significantly across different regions and communities. Buddhism, premarital sex is not explicitly forbidden in Buddhist texts, but sexual conduct should avoid harm and be rooted in mutual respect and consent. Attitudes towards contraception and reproductive rights. Christianity, views on contraception vary widely. The Roman Catholic Church opposes artificial contraception, advocating for natural family planning, while many Protestant denominations support the use of contraceptives. Islam permits contraception as long as it does not harm either partner and is mutually agreed upon. The primary consideration is the welfare of the family. Hinduism, Hindu attitudes towards contraception are generally permissive, with an emphasis on responsible parenthood and family planning. Buddhism, most Buddhist traditions accept the use of contraception, focusing on the intent and consequences of its use rather than the act itself. How religious teachings influence personal and public health policies. Religious teachings significantly impact both personal decisions and public policies regarding premarital sex and contraception. Personal decisions. Individuals often align their sexual behaviors and contraceptive use with their religious beliefs, seeking guidance from religious authorities and texts. Public policies. In many countries, religious groups influence legislation on issues such as sex education, access to contraception, and reproductive rights. For example, Catholic teachings have shaped policies on contraception and abortion in several predominantly Catholic countries. Sexual education and awareness. The role of religious institutions in sexual education. Religious institutions play a crucial role in shaping sexual education, often advocating for curricula that align with their moral and ethical values. Christianity. Many Christian institutions promote abstinence-only education, emphasizing the moral and spiritual dimensions of sexuality. Islamic teachings on sexual education often stress modesty, chastity, and the importance of marriage. Programs may include guidance on moral conduct and family life. Hinduism. Hindu approaches to sexual education can vary, with some promoting traditional values and others incorporating modern scientific knowledge. Buddhism. Buddhist perspectives on sexual education emphasize mindfulness, respect, and non-harm, integrating ethical considerations with practical information. Balancing religious teachings with modern sexual education. Balancing religious teachings with modern sexual education involves integrating moral and ethical values with scientifically accurate information. Challenges. Religious doctrines may conflict with scientific and secular approaches to sexual education, leading to debates over curriculum content and teaching methods. Solutions. Some educational programs successfully blend religious and modern perspectives, providing comprehensive sexual education that respects religious values while promoting health and well-being. Efforts to promote sexual health within religious frameworks. Faith-based organizations. Many faith-based organizations work to promote sexual health within the context of religious teachings, offering resources and support for individuals and communities. Community programs. Programs that address sexual health from a religious perspective often include discussions on morality, responsibility, and the importance of healthy relationships. Interfaith initiatives. Collaborative efforts among different religious groups can foster a more inclusive and comprehensive approach to sexual health education, bridging gaps and promoting mutual understanding. Historical movements. The impact of religious reformations on sexual liberation. Christian Reformation. The Protestant Reformation led by figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin which challenged the Catholic Church's teachings on celibacy, marriage, and sexuality. The emphasis on personal interpretation of the Bible allowed for diverse views on sexual ethics. Islamic reform movements. Modernist movements in the 19th and 20th centuries, such as the work of Egyptian reformer Qasim Amin, who advocated for women's rights and gender equality within an Islamic framework. Efforts to reinterpret the Quran and Hadith to support more progressive views on gender and sexuality. Hindu social reformers. 19th century figures like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who campaigned against practices like sati and child marriage, promoting women's rights and sexual ethics aligned with modern values. Key figures and movements that challenged traditional sexual norms. Margaret Sanger, Christianity. An advocate for birth control and founder of the American Birth Control League, which later became Planned Parenthood. Her work intersected with religious debates on contraception. Asghar Ali, engineer, Islam. An Indian Islamic scholar who championed women's rights and worked towards gender justice within the Islamic community. Ruth Vanita and Salim Kidwai, Hinduism. Scholars who documented historical instances of same-sex love in India, challenging contemporary homophobic interpretations of Hindu texts. Tenzin Palmo, Buddhism. A British nun in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition who advocated for the full ordination of women and gender equality in Buddhist monastic practices. Rabbi Stephen Greenberg, Judaism. An openly gay Orthodox rabbi who works to reconcile LGBTQ+ identities with Jewish faith. Modern activism. How religious groups contribute to or resist sexual liberation movements. Christianity. Contributions. Progressive Christian groups advocating for LGBTQ+ rights, such as the Metropolitan Community Church. Resistance. Conservative denominations opposing same-sex marriage and abortion, like the Southern Baptist Convention. Islam. Contributions. Progressive Muslim organizations like Muslims for Progressive Values supporting gender equality and LGBTQ+ rights. Resistance. Traditionalist groups and countries implementing Sharia law with strict sexual norms. Hinduism. Contributions. Movements like the Nas Foundation in India, which played a key role in the decriminalization of homosexuality. Resistance. Conservative factions within Hinduism promoting traditional family values and opposing LGBTQ+ rights. Buddhism. Contributions. The Dalai Lama's statements supporting LGBTQ+ rights within a compassionate framework. Resistance. Traditional Buddhist communities maintaining conservative views on sexuality. Judaism. Contributions. Reform and Reconstructionist movements advocating for LGBTQ+ inclusion and gender equality. Resistance. Orthodox Judaism's adherence to traditional sexual norms and opposition to same-sex marriage. Interfaith initiatives promoting sexual rights and equality. Faith in America. An interfaith organization that aims to end religious-based bigotry against LGBTQ+ individuals by engaging religious communities in dialogue and advocacy. The World Council of Churches promotes human rights, including sexual rights, across its diverse Christian member communities. United Religions Initiative encourages interfaith cooperation to address global issues, including sexual rights and equality. Stories of individuals and communities balancing faith and sexual freedom. Christianity. Rev. Dr. Paula Stone Williams, a transgender pastor who shares her journey of faith and gender transition, advocating for acceptance within Christian communities. Islam. Ludovic Mohammed Zahid, an openly gay imam from France who founded the first inclusive mosque in Europe, advocating for LGBTQ+ Muslims. Hinduism. Akkai Padmashali, an Indian transgender activist who balances her Hindu faith with her work in promoting LGBTQ+ rights. Buddhism. Kodo Nishimura, a Japanese Buddhist monk and makeup artist who embraces his LGBTQ+ identity and promotes inclusivity. Judaism. Yiska Smith, an Orthodox Jewish transgender woman who shares her experiences of reconciling her faith and gender identity. References: Religion and Sexuality, Perspectives and Practices Across Cultures. Scholarly articles and books. Ali, K. 2006. Sexual Ethics and Islam, Feminist Reflections on Quran, Hadith, and Jurisprudence. One World Publications. Cornwall, S. 2011. Contemporary Christianity and LGBT Sexualities. Ashgate Publishing. Greenberg, S. 2004. Wrestling with God and Men, Homosexuality in the Jewish Tradition. University of Wisconsin Press. Vanita, R. and Kidwai, S. 2001. Same-Sex Love in India, Readings from Literature and History. St. Martin's Press. Williams, R. P. 2019. The Bible and Sexuality, Exploring Issues of Sexual Expression and Identity in the Scriptures. Academic Press. Syker, J. S. 2006. Homosexuality and Religion, an Encyclopedia. Greenwood Publishing Group. Helminiak, D. A. 1994. What the Bible Really Says About Homosexuality. Almo Square Press. Sacred Texts. The Holy Bible, Various Translations. The Quran, Various Translations. The Torah, Various Translations. The Pali Canon, Theravada Buddhist Scriptures. The Laws of Manu, Manusmriti. The Kama Sutra by Vatsyayana. Case Studies and Personal Narratives. Siraj Al-Haq Kugle, S. 2014. Living Out Islam, Voices of Gay, Lesbian and Transgender Muslims. New York University Press. Stone, J. 2016. Transforming Faith, Stories of LGBT Christians. Leyland, W. 1998. Queer Dharma, Voices of Gay Buddhists. Greenberg, S. 2004. Wrestling with God and Men, Homosexuality in the Jewish Tradition. University of Wisconsin Press. These references offer a comprehensive look into the interplay between religion and sexuality, providing valuable insights from a range of religious perspectives and scholarly analysis. If you enjoyed this, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share and leave a comment. Thanks for listening. Madan Mohan, Global Humanity Mission.